Hello and welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. My name is Dana and thank you for taking some of your time today to watch one of my orchid videos. Today's video is going to be just a bit of a orchid chit chat, a growth update, a look at 5 orchids that I haven't shown you for a while. And you know, we think during the winter months that our orchids aren't doing very much, but it really is a time to be a really careful and keen orchid observer so that you can notice the changes that are happening, because they are very, very slowly oftentimes growing, and we have to look really, really carefully to find it. So that's what we're going to be doing today with my 5 orchids. So we're going to start with this reed stem epidendrum named Kagaribi. And I purchased this at my local nursery, and it bloomed prior to me purchasing it last year. So I've almost had this orchid 1 year, and when I purchased it, the bloom was already gone, and I just recently cut the spike because it turned brown. So I am trying to be very patient to see if I can get it to bloom from the larger stem that it grew for me over the growing season. That's not happening yet. However, down at the very base of the plant, it is getting some new growth. So if you look very, very carefully, you can see that tiny little new stem sprout right down here. And that's also a good sign. You know, it's thinking about spring coming and new growth. I am still going to keep my fingers crossed that it may choose to bloom for me. And if it doesn't within another year, after it has really had time to adapt to my environment, then I'll need to research this and see if I can figure out what I'm not providing to it so that it can bloom. All right, so that's the first update. The second update is going to be my completely winter resting Dendrobium Little Sweet Scent. And when I first made a video of this one, when it still had all of its leaves, I said, you know, we'll have to wait and see if this is semi-deciduous or possibly completely deciduous. Well, I think I'm ready to declare this one to be completely deciduous. There is 1 leaf left, and that one is yellowing and probably will fall off shortly. Otherwise, this orchid is completely leafless. The canes are not shriveled yet from the lack of watering, but you know, that may or may not happen. The only water I'm giving this is maybe just a light mist every once in a while over the top, simply to give it humidity on the days that are a bit drier during the winter, but otherwise I'm not watering this, not feeding it. And so the hope is that it has had the correct type of care so that in the spring the bloom buds will appear along the leafless canes. So that's yet to be seen. I don't see any indication of buds yet, but I'm hopeful. Okay, so that's the second orchid. And now the third one is a Cattleya type orchid. This one is Potinara Audrey Hartman. And I've maybe had this one about 7 or 8 months. And it has put on, let's see, 1 new growth for me, and it's this one right here. But the thing that's encouraging about this is that I had repotted it after I'd had it for a while, and it did put down some pretty good roots into the pot, so that was encouraging. And now this new growth, I do believe, has a bloom sheath appearing right there. So hopefully sometime soon there will be a bloom on this little Cattleya type orchid. Okay, and the next one is Encyclia David M. Johnston. Now, David M. Johnston was a hybridizer, and this is actually a cross between 2 species Encyclias, Mossbucii and Atrorubens, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I need to do a bit more research on this one. This one was how it was shipped to me. So it's in a plastic pot, inside of a clay pot. It does like to be watered relatively frequently so that the bulbs don't shrivel too much. This was the newest growth, and clearly it's growing in this direction over the edge of the pot. So I will be having to address this one as soon as it has new growth. And I just noticed the other day when I watered it, if you look right at the bottom of that, I'm going to move my finger so that I don't make a shadow on it. But if you look right at the bottom of that, you can see the tiniest little green sprout of some sort. Now, I don't know exactly where this one blooms from, so I'm imagining that that's probably another pseudobulb growth. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm anxious for this one to sort of take off and do its next thing. And let me put the name up for you. Encyclia David M. Johnston, a cross between two species orchids, so it is a primary hybrid. Okay, and lastly is my Encostyle Firecat Harmony. And you saw this orchid before when it was in bloom over the fall. And this is also the orchid where the top was really growing a lot of moss mold, because this one is still planted as I received it, completely in moss as best I can tell. It does like to stay pretty wet continuously. But what's going to happen is that the new growth, which is already starting right here, doesn't have room. So this one is going to have to be put into a larger pot at some point in the near term, because these pseudobulbs are gigantic and there would just never be enough room for this to grow right up against the edge of the pot. So this one will be a repotting task at some point when this is probably a little bit larger and I'm able to kind of peek down in there and see if it has started root growth. Okay, so that's my update on 5 of the orchids in my collection. As I mentioned at the beginning, really be a careful and keen observer of what your orchids are doing even in the winter, because changes are happening. They're just happening very slowly. And I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen to a video that I did earlier about watching your orchids carefully. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up, and the subscribe button will be coming up in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. The notifications bell is a great way to know when I've posted something new. Thank you so much for watching on this very cold winter day, even in Southeast Texas. There's a pot of soup going right over here, and I'll talk with you next time. Thanks for watching.